Republicans are currently tripping over each other, trying to figure out how they're going to pass Donald Trump's massive domestic spending agenda. They have a lot of things on their plate. Donald Trump wants to expand his tax cuts, which cost about $4.5 trillion. He then wants to stop taxing Social Security payments, which is about another trillion. He wants to cut no tax. He wants to take away tax on tips, which is another $100 billion. All of these things cost a ton of money. And the House and the Senate Republicans simply do not agree on how to go about doing this. And we've been watching them work in parallel over the last couple weeks, basically going on two totally separate tracks. So if you haven't been following, the House has said, we're going to put up one big, beautiful bill that's going to have everything Donald Trump wants to do. Beefing up the military, beefing up the border, all the tax cuts you can think of. All of that going to be in one bill. Senate Republicans are like, the other tax stuff is going to take a lot of time. Let's just do the defense and the border funding right now, and then we'll get to tax season, a couple months from now. And it was up in the air which side Donald Trump wanted. Senators behind the scenes were reporting to Politico that Donald Trump was on their side, that Donald Trump wanted them to pass two bills, one small bill and then one tax bill. And then, out of nowhere, at least to me, who's like keeping up with everything that's been going said through the newspapers, then Donald Trump says, I support the House big, beautiful bill plan. And then all the senators are like, what the hell have I been doing?
Yeah. It was funny. It is funny, obviously.
It's obviously funny.
Yes,
it's obviously funny. And it's also interesting because I don't think it's infighting yet. It's more just confusion than infighting.
Yeah. It's more just wondering what they're gonna hear next from Trump.
Yes, and also knowing that they cannot under any circumstance criticize the choice he makes.
Yeah.
You can never criticize the choice Donald Trump makes because he is the king, as he posted on Truth Social. So that makes it true because it's on Truth Social.
Yeah.
He's the king now.
Exactly. Did you see? Sorry, I have to sidebar. Did you see the thing about how the State Department has banned official accounts, like work accounts, basically for news outlets, including the New York Times, CNN, The Economist, like all of the mainstream news outlets? They basically put out a memo and they were like, we're going to cancel these subscriptions because they do not align with the views or the agenda of the president.
Unbelievable, dude.
Yeah.
That is insane.
Isn't that wild?
Okay, so the congressional Republicans is continuing that insanity with how they are proposing this bill. So let's go into the House bill and talk about what's in it. We put out a video on that recently, but it's important now because the divisions are getting stronger and also the hypocrisy is so palpable, it makes me want to vomit. So in order to pay for this $4.5 trillion tax cut, oh, wait, I'm sorry. They're not paying for the $4.5 trillion tax cut. They're only paying for $1.5 trillion.
Or at most $2 trillion is what they've been talking about.
$2 trillion.
Yes. So this is the thing. We have to drive this home, right? Because Doge and everything we're seeing about that in the media is all about fiscal responsibility, right? We're going to cut so that our debt doesn't completely overwhelm us. I'm sitting here as someone genuinely worried about the debt.
Me too.
And I'm just like, head in my hands, shaking my head. Like our interest payments are skyrocketing, are around $1 trillion a year right now.
They're going to be greater than our entire defense budget next year.
Yes. So that's what we're on pace for. And this plan doesn't even reduce deficits.
No.
So we're not even reducing the rate at which we are taking on debt.
No, we are increasing the rate in which we're taking on debt under Donald Trump.
That is what's happening. Cut taxes for the rich. Just for that.
Just to cut taxes for the rich. We did a little bit of a breakdown of the Trump tax cuts in the last video, but just really quickly, if you will see, if you're making like $50,000, $60,000, you'll see like a 1% increase in your salary every year post taxes. If you're making over $500,000, then you're going to see like a 4% increase in your post tax income. If you're in the top 1%, it's like a fucking 7% increase in your post-tax income. That is all. We are going into debt and destroying the financial stability of our country just to give money to rich people. Yes. That is what Donald Trump does. That is his only legacy. Now, this is what congressional Republicans want to do to offset even $1.5 to $2 trillion of it. Okay? They want to cut food stamps by 20%.
$230 billion
is 20% of all of food stamps. That is 20% of all of food stamps, people.
Yes.
This is money that this program keeps millions of people out of hunger every single year. It doesn't just keep people out of hunger, it also helps farmers sell off their surplus produce. So it's also a farmer's subsidy. Farmers, impoverished people, rural America getting screwed over by Donald Trump yet again. Then, in the other aspect, how else are they going to pay for it? An $880 billion cut to Medicaid. That is a 10% cut to Medicaid at the federal level. What will that do? 14 million people lose their health insurance in the first year alone. 2 million people every year after that for the next decade. We're talking about reducing the amount of people with health insurance in this country by 8% over the next 10 years.
Yeah. So this plan is wild, terrible for the economy, does not help the debt or the deficit.
Does not help people.
No. The only positive is cutting taxes for the rich. So if you are rich and you see that as that, those are the only winners.
Yeah.
Those are the only winners of this bill.
Yes.
The good news is it is looking less and less likely that it will be able to pass.
Yes.
Right?
And this is fascinating because in the first Trump administration, the only thing the Republican Party agreed on was tax cuts. That's the only thing they agreed on. But now that they're having to actually cut spending to get these tax cuts paid for, all of them are starting to realize, oh my God, this government that we've been running against for so long is actually really popular with the people who voted us in. And if we take away their health care, maybe we'll lose every election to come.
And that's the thing too. These MAGA voters, these MAGA supporters are often largely they're poor people.
They're on Medicaid.
Poor people living in rural areas that need government support. These are the exact people who this government infrastructure has been built out for.
And as a liberal, they are people that I care about government working for.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? That's the thing
This
about
is the point.
Yes, this is the point. The liberal project about expanding the social safety net is reaching every corner of rural America and making sure you have a hospital, making sure you have access to food, making sure you have health insurance, making sure you have education, which is another thing they want to cut.
Yep.
Rural education funding is another thing they want to cut in this bill. So everything that Donald Trump is doing is attack in the heart of rural America. But then this is what is so fascinating to me and makes me want to fucking go crazy is Donald Trump in an interview Tuesday night says, I am not going to cut Medicaid at all. I'm only going to cut the fraud and the abuse, and I'm not going to cut Medicaid. Nobody will see a single change to their insurance. It's only going to be better. Then he wakes up the next morning after his interview, and then he says, I endorse the House GOP plan that cuts $880 billion out of Medicaid. I struggle with the cognitive dissonance because I'm too left-brained. Okay, I can't deal with it.
Has anyone asked him about it yet?
No.
Do you know? Okay,
no one
any
has asked
reporters?
about it yet from as I know. As I know of, no one has asked about it yet.
Okay. I wonder if someone will because it is so obvious.
Yeah, it's so odd. Like we're talking about 10% cuts of Medicaid. Shocker, guys. Medicaid isn't 10% fraud and abuse. Shocker. I don't know if you knew that or not.
Yeah.
So it's and the House Republicans are now scratching their head because they get the news that Trump is on their side. They want their bill passed. He wants their bill passed. But then he says, the whole pay for your bill, I don't want. Find a new one. Well, let me tell you, Norman from South Carolina, Chip Roy from Texas, those guys aren't going to pass a massive tax cut unless you give them massive spending cuts.
And this is the interesting place where we're at, where there are certain Republicans who have become hardline on the spending issue. They're hardline on the deficit. They're like, we need to reduce the deficit significantly. And they appear to not be willing to budge on that. But then there are other Republicans, more centrist Republicans, who are like, my constituents rely on Medicaid. They rely on food stamps. I'm not comfortable passing this bill. So you have this tug in either direction. And I guess I guess what I'm saying, they're not comfortable passing the bill, especially given the tax cuts, right? So I just don't know how they reconcile this.
I don't know how they reconcile it either. Like we're talking about Mike Johnson getting a letter from 8 members of the House in the Hispanic caucus, Republicans, writing a letter saying, our constituents rely on Medicaid. we can't go through with these Medicaid cuts. The House GOP only has like a 2-seat majority right now. I think it's going to be 3 by the end of April because of special elections. You can't lose 8 votes.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how you rectify this between the Chip Roys and the people who don't want to cut Medicaid. I don't see a path forward here. And we're talking about at least having to hit $1.5 trillion of offsets. You absolutely, literally cannot hit $1.5 trillion of offsets unless you tackle Medicaid.
Yeah.
It is physically, mathematically impossible to do so.
Well,
unless you cut the military.
And or Social Security and or Medicare.
And I think Trump is even more adamant about not touching those things.
Yes.
Yes, I think Trump is even more adamant. And I think the congressional backlash would be even more adamant.
We should say about the military, though, it came out like yesterday that Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has ordered the Pentagon to look into ways to cut 8% of their budget.
And that 8% budget cut that Hegseth is saying that he wants out of the Pentagon is coming off the heels of Senate Republicans writing up a bill to give the Pentagon $100 billion more over the next decade. Again, the disconnect.
Yes.
What's going on? The confusion. Nobody's on the same page. We're talking about Senate. We're not talking about one senator proposing something that's against the administration. We're talking about the Senate leadership and congressional leadership going against what the Secretary of Defense wants. I don't understand how these two things are going on at the same time. Are they not talking to each other?
No.
Like, how not? Like, this is not how politics is supposed to be operating. But then again,
we're past that.
Pete Hegseth is a goddamn Fox News commentator, so why should I expect him to have any wherewithal about how the Pentagon gets funded?
The executive branch right now, it just is not functioning in the way that politics should function.
Yeah.
Right? It is functioning in the bluntest possible way where they're just throwing shit at the wall and everyone else is forced to react to it.
Do you think that this is making making Trump as a weak president? Like, do you think that no.
I mean in the eyes of voters?
No. I mean like actually what he's going to be able to do to fundamentally change the country. Because if he does everything through executive order, the next president can just undo it. Nothing changes.
But in the 4 years that his executive orders are in place, they can do a lot.
They could do a lot. No, I get that. It just seems to me like it's a little bit of a weak politician to not be able to corral your Congress to doing what you want to do if you control your own party.
He doesn't care to.
Right.
Yes. So like I don't know. I don't want to be like, "Oh, you're such a weak doofus, Trump. You can't even corral your own party." Like he can, and the way he does it is by going on Truth Social and being like, "I want you to pass the House bill." Right. So we still have to see how this plays out, obviously.
Yeah, we still have to see once he starts calling congressional Republicans how that starts going.
Yeah.
Because I imagine they have to fall in line. But 2026 rolls around, like that's when the Medicaid cuts will hit, and 14 million people will lose their health insurance overnight in 2026, and that's an election year. Like that's something that's going to be right on the top of people's minds going into that. And so I think congressional Republicans are going to have a really, really hard time dealing with that, and I don't think they're ready to settle this difference.